Lyra Tesh sat at her workstation, staring at the same 3 monitors she had been watching for the past 6 hours. Nothing ever happened on the night shift. The screens showed empty space, peaceful and boring, just like every other night for the past 2 years. I swear, if I have to watch another meteor drift by, I'm going to lose my mind, she said to Vren, her co-worker who sat 2 stations away. Vren laughed, his blue skin catching the light from his own monitors. You say that every night. Face it, Lyra, this is the job. We watch, nothing happens. We go home, we come back and do it again. Lyra leaned back in her chair and stretched. She was 26 years old, young for someone working in the Planetary Defense Coordination Center, but that was only because nobody wanted this job anymore. The Cathir had been at peace for 300 years. Their sector of space was safe, protected by treaties and mutual defense agreements with a dozen other species. The defense center was just a formality now, a building full of people watching screens that never showed anything dangerous. I know, Lyra said. I just thought this job would be more exciting. When I was studying communications at the academy, I imagined making first contact with new species, translating unknown languages, being part of something important, and instead you're here watching empty space with me, Vren said. He tossed a small container of food across to her desk. Eat something. You've been here since sunset. Lyra caught the container and opened it. Inside was a portion of grain cakes, her favorite. Thanks. You know, sometimes I wonder what it would be like if something actually did happen. What if one day we detected a ship we'd never seen before? What if every screen in the facility turned red? Lyra stopped talking. Her mouth was still open, the words frozen on her tongue. She stared at her monitors, not understanding what she was seeing. This couldn't be real. The sensors had to be malfunctioning. But Vren was standing now, his chair knocked backward. Other officers across the room were shouting. The alarm systems began blaring, a sound Lyra had only heard during drills. What is that? Vren shouted over the noise. Lyra's hands moved across her control panel, pulling up data, checking and rechecking the readings. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. A ship, she whispered. Then louder, a ship! Something just appeared in orbit. That's impossible, Vren said, rushing over to her station. Nothing can just appear. Ships have to decelerate from faster-than-light travel. They come through jump points. They don't just materialize. But the data didn't lie. One moment, the orbital space above Velara had been empty. The next moment, there was a vessel. Huge, angular, broadcasting signals on frequencies the Cathir hadn't used in centuries. Back when they were first learning to leave their planet, the facility director burst from her office, her face pale. Someone tell me what's happening! Lyra forced herself to focus. Her training kicked in, pushing past the fear. Director Mesa, we have an unidentified vessel in high orbit. It appeared without warning. No deceleration signature, no jump point activation, just appeared. Director Mesa moved to Lyra's station, studying the data. What's its size? Approximately 800 meters long. Mass readings are... Director, it's massive. Much denser than our ships. Energy signature, unlike anything in our database. It's using power systems we can't identify. And Director, Lyra pulled up another screen. It's broadcasting. Trying to make contact. The room fell silent except for the alarms. Everyone was looking at Lyra now. She was the communications specialist. This was her moment. The one she had dreamed about, and she had never been more terrified in her life. Can you decode it? Director Mesa asked quietly. Lyra's fingers trembled as she worked. I'm trying. The signal is structured. Mathematical sequences. Basic chemistry. They're trying to establish communication using universal constants. She paused, her eyes widening. Director, whoever they are, they're smart. Very smart. This is a perfect first contact protocol. Do we have visual? One of the other officers brought up an image on the main screen at the front of the room. Everyone gasped. The ship was like nothing they had ever seen. It wasn't smooth and curved like Cathir vessels. It was all sharp angles and flat surfaces, covered in what looked like armor plating. Weapons ports were visible along its hull, though none of them were active. The ship looked like it had been designed by someone who expected to be attacked at any moment. Get me the council, Director Mesa ordered. Wake them up if you have to. And someone contact the collective embassy. We need backup here. Lyra barely heard her. She was focused on the signal, on the patterns within it, mathematical sequences giving way to physical constants. The speed of light. the mass of a hydrogen atom, the Planck length. Whoever was on that ship was brilliant. They were laying out a foundation for translation, building from the ground up using things that were true everywhere in the universe. I can respond, Lyra said suddenly. I think I can use the same method they're using. Send back our own mathematical sequences, start building a translation matrix. Do it, Director Mesa said. Lyra's hands flew across her controls. She built a message using the same structure the unknown ship had used. Basic mathematics first, then chemistry, then simple concepts, yes, no, question, answer, peace, danger, friend, enemy. She sent the message and waited. The response came back in less than 10 seconds. Her translation software began processing it, matching patterns, building connections. Words began to appear on her screen, rough and uncertain but readable. We receive. Who are you? Lyra typed her response carefully. We are Kathir. This is our world. Who are you? What do you want? The answer came faster this time. The unknown ship's computer was learning, adapting to their language with frightening speed. We are human. From planet Earth, we explore. We want to talk, to learn. We are peaceful. Lyra read the message 3 times before she could believe it. She looked up at Director Mesa. They say they're peaceful. They want to talk. Do you believe them? The director asked. Lyra looked at the image of the ship on the main screen. That angular armored hull, those weapon ports, the sheer power radiating from it. Everything about that vessel screamed danger. But the message was gentle, patient. They had appeared without warning, but they hadn't moved closer. They hadn't powered weapons. They were waiting. I don't know, Lyra admitted, but they're not acting hostile. High above Velara, inside the ship called Wanderer's Hope, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the blue and green planet below. It was beautiful, this world. From orbit, he could see cities glowing in the darkness of the night side, oceans reflecting the light of the system's sun, life, civilization, a peaceful world, unaware of how big and dangerous the universe really was. Captain, we're receiving a response, said Lieutenant Amy Pierce from her station. She was tall and sharp-featured, her eyes constantly scanning her tactical displays. Even now, during first contact, she was ready for threats. Put it through, Jake said. The translation came through on his screen. He read it and smiled slightly. Fear. The message was professional, but he could read the fear beneath it. They wanted to know who humans were and what they wanted. Standard questions. He would have asked the same things. Dr. Cross, how's our translation matrix holding up? Jake asked. Nathan Cross looked up from his science station, his face bright with excitement. It's working beautifully, Captain. Their language has some similarities to the Kelter language we learned from that abandoned outpost 2 years ago. Our computer is adapting quickly. I'd say we'll have 70% accuracy within the hour. Good. Draft a response. Keep it simple and non-threatening. Make sure they know we're not here to cause trouble. Nathan worked quickly, his fingers dancing across his controls. How's this? We are explorers from Earth representing humanity. We come in peace to learn and share knowledge. We understand this contact may be startling. We will maintain position and await your comfort to proceed. Jake read it over and nodded. Send it, Amy, status report. Amy didn't look away from her screens. No signs of weapons lock. They have some defense satellites in orbit, but they're minimal. Looks like they haven't had to defend themselves in a long time. I'm detecting what might be military ships in orbit around one of the moons, but they're not moving to intercept. Keep monitoring. I don't want any surprises. Jake moved to the forward viewport and looked down at the planet. This was humanity's first contact with the Kathir. They had encountered 3 other species during their 2 centuries of space travel, all of them friendly so far. But each contact was critical. One wrong move, one misunderstood gesture, and humanity could find themselves at war with an entire sector of space. He remembered his training at the First Contact Academy on Earth. The instructors had drilled it into every student. Humanity's history was violent, bloody, full of wars and conflicts that had nearly destroyed their species multiple times. Other races would fear that history once they learned about it. The key was to show them that humanity had learned from its mistakes, that they carried weapons but preferred to use words. Captain, they're responding again, Nathan said. They're asking about our faster-than-light technology. They want to know how we appeared without using a jump point. 3 days had passed since the human ship appeared above Velara. 3 days of constant communication, careful translation work, and growing understanding between two species that had never known each other existed. Lyra had barely slept during that time. Every few hours brought new messages from the humans, new information, new questions. She felt like she was drinking from a waterfall, trying to absorb everything at once. The Kathir Council had approved the formation of an official first contact team. To Lyra's shock and terror, she had been placed on it. Director Mesa had insisted. "You've already built a rapport with them," the director had said. "They know your communication style. It makes sense to keep you involved." Now Lyra sat in a meeting room with 8 other Kathir, all of them older and more experienced than her, diplomats, scientists, military advisors, and somehow she was expected to contribute equally. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "The question we need to answer," said Diplomat Hessen, a stern older male with decades of experience, "is whether these humans represent a threat to the collective." "They haven't acted threatening," said one of the scientists. "All their communications have been peaceful. They've shared technical data freely, which itself is suspicious," Hessen replied. "Why would they share sensitive information unless they don't fear us? What does that say about their military capabilities compared to ours?" Lyra spoke up before she could stop herself. "Maybe they're just being friendly." Everyone looked at her. She felt her face grow warm, her skin darkening to a deeper blue. But she continued, "We always assume the worst. What if they really are peaceful? What if they want to build a relationship based on trust?" Hessen gave her a look that wasn't quite dismissive but wasn't encouraging either. "Trust is earned over years, child, not days. We need more information about these humans before we can make any judgments." "Then let me ask them," Lyra said, surprising herself with her boldness. "They've been answering every question honestly so far. What if we just ask them directly about their history, their culture, their intentions?" The room fell silent. Director Mesa, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. "That's actually not a bad idea. Lyra has established the primary communication channel with them. They might be more open with her than with an official diplomat." Hessen frowned but nodded slowly. "Very well." Lyra composed a message. "Ask them about their history, how they developed so quickly, what their society values, and most importantly, ask them about their military capabilities." Lyra nodded and pulled out her communication tablet. She thought carefully about how to phrase the questions. Too direct might seem aggressive. Too subtle might not get real answers. Finally, she wrote, "We are curious about humanity. Your people have accomplished much in a short time. Can you tell us about your history? What drives your species? How did you develop your technology so quickly?" She sent the message through the quantum-linked communication system that had been established between the defense center and the human ship. The response came back within minutes, faster than usual. The message was longer than any they had received before. "Our history is complicated. Humanity developed on a world with many challenges. We faced conflicts, struggles for resources, natural disasters. Our species learned to adapt or die. We developed technology out of necessity, often driven by competition between different groups of humans. Our faster-than-light drive was created during a period of great danger, when we feared our world might not survive. We built it as an escape plan. We reached the stars not because we were peaceful, but because we were desperate. But now, having seen the universe, we want to be better than we were. We want to build instead of destroy. We want to learn instead of conquer. We carry our past with us, but we hope it doesn't define our future." Lyra read the message twice, then 3 times. The other members of the contact team crowded around her, reading over her shoulder. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of breathing. "They fought each other," one of the scientists whispered. "They developed technology through conflict. And they're admitting it openly," Director Mesa said. "That takes courage." Hessen looked troubled. "Or it's a warning. They're telling us they know how to fight." Lyra thought about the message, about the careful honesty in it. She typed a response. "We appreciate your honesty. Can you tell us more about these conflicts? How did humanity overcome them?" The answer came back quickly. "We nearly destroyed ourselves several times. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that could wipe out cities in seconds. But each time enough of us survived to rebuild. We learned slowly, painfully, that cooperation was stronger than competition. That survival meant working together instead of fighting. We still have conflicts, but we've learned to resolve them without violence most of the time. We are not perfect. We are still learning." Lyra felt a chill run through her body. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that could destroy cities. The Kathir had fought wars in their past too, but Nothing on that scale. Their conflicts had been small, limited, resolved quickly through negotiation. These humans had nearly destroyed their entire species and somehow survived. She looked around the room. Everyone had the same expression, a mixture of horror and fascination. These humans were dangerous, incredibly dangerous. But they were also honest about it, and they claimed to have moved beyond their violent past. Hessen cleared his throat. Ask them about their military capabilities. We need to know what we're dealing with. Lyra hesitated. That seemed like a rude question, but she was following orders. She typed carefully. We understand you come in peace. But we must ask, what military capabilities does your ship have? Our people need to know for security purposes. The response took longer this time. When it came, it was surprisingly detailed. The Wanderer's Hope is an exploration vessel, not a warship. However, all human ships are designed with defensive capabilities. We have point defense systems for meteor protection that can also target missiles. We have electronic warfare systems to defend against hacking and sensor jamming. We have railguns that can fire projectiles at high speeds. And we have armor plating designed to withstand radiation and debris impacts. Our ship could defend itself if necessary, but it's not designed for offensive operations. We are explorers first, fighters only if we have no other choice. One of the military advisors in the room pulled up technical data on his own tablet. If even half of what they're describing is true, their exploration ship is better armed than our military vessels. The railguns alone would tear through our hull armor like paper. But they're not threatening us with those weapons, Director Mesa pointed out. They're just being honest about what they have. Lyra sent another message driven by her own curiosity now rather than orders. Why do you arm your exploration ships so heavily? The answer came back almost immediately. Because space is dangerous. Because we've learned that hoping for peace isn't enough. You must be prepared for war to truly maintain peace. Because we've encountered hostile species before, and we survived only because we could defend ourselves. We hope never to use our weapons, but we would be foolish to travel unarmed. Lyra sat back in her chair, her mind spinning. Everything about humanity contradicted itself. They were peaceful but prepared for war. They wanted to explore but carried weapons. They claimed to have moved beyond violence but designed every ship with combat in mind. Who were these people? She looked at the others in the room. I want to speak with them directly, not through text messages. I want to see them, hear their voices. I want to understand them. Hessen started to object, but Director Mesa cut him off. I agree. We've been dancing around each other with text for 3 days. It's time for a real conversation. Lyra, send them a request for a video communication. Lyra's hands were shaking again as she typed the message. We would like to meet you face to face through visual communication. Would this be acceptable? The response was immediate. Yes, we would be honored. We can establish a video link whenever you're ready. 20 minutes later, Lyra sat in front of a large screen in the communications center. The entire first contact team was behind her. Technicians had set up cameras and audio systems. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone in the room could hear it. The screen flickered to life and Lyra saw a human face for the first time. Captain Jake Morrison looked tired but alert. His skin was pale compared to the Cathier's blue, with slight pink undertones. His eyes were a striking color somewhere between green and brown. He had hair on his head, dark and cut short, and when he smiled, Lyra saw that his teeth were white and straight. Hello, Jake said, and the translation software converted his words into Cathier almost instantly. I'm Captain Jake Morrison. It's good to finally see you. Lyra found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. I'm Lyra Tesh. I've been handling the communication between our people. You've done an excellent job, Jake said. Your translation work has been impressive. Behind Jake, Lyra could see other humans moving around what must be the bridge of their ship. They looked similar to Jake, but with variations in skin tone, hair color, and facial features. She realized that humans like Cathier had diversity within their species. Captain Morrison, Lyra said, gaining confidence. We've been reading. A week had passed since the first video call with the humans. In that time, formal delegations had been established on both sides. The Cathier Council had assigned their best diplomats to handle negotiations. Trade discussions had begun. Cultural exchange programs were being planned. Everything was moving forward exactly as it should during a first contact situation. But Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was being left unsaid. The official meetings were polite, professional, full of careful language and diplomatic dancing. Nobody was asking the hard questions anymore. Nobody wanted to risk offending the humans or damaging the fragile relationship being built. Lyra had been moved to a support role, handling technical aspects of communication, rather than participating in the actual negotiations. She should have been happy. She had done her job, established first contact, and now the experts were taking over. But instead, she felt frustrated. She wanted to understand the humans, not just negotiate with them. So when Dr. Nathan Cross sent a personal message asking if she would be willing to have an informal conversation, just the two of them, she agreed immediately. Against protocol, probably against orders, but she agreed anyway. They met via video link late in the evening, Velara time. Nathan appeared on her screen looking relaxed, wearing casual clothing instead of his uniform. He was sitting in what looked like a small personal quarters, not the formal bridge. "Thanks for agreeing to talk," Nathan said, smiling. "I hope I'm not getting you in trouble." "Probably a little," Lyra admitted. "But I wanted to talk too. The official meetings are so stiff. Everyone is being too careful." Nathan laughed. "Right? I've been in 3 trade negotiations this week, and every single one was just people dancing around what they really want to say. It's exhausting." Lyra felt herself relaxing. Nathan was easy to talk to, friendly in a way that felt genuine. "Can I ask you something?" "Not as part of official contact. Just as one person to another?" "Of course. That's why I wanted to talk. How did humanity really advance so quickly?" Lyra leaned forward. "I've read the technical data you shared. I've looked at the timeline. The Kathir took 1,500 years to develop safe faster than light travel. You did it in 200. That shouldn't be possible." Nathan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was serious. "The honest answer? War. Competition. Necessity. Things that your people managed to avoid, we couldn't escape." "I don't understand." Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "Okay, let me give you some context. On Earth, humans didn't develop as one unified species. We had hundreds of different nations, different cultures, all competing for resources on one planet. When one nation developed a new technology, others had to match it or risk being conquered. That constant pressure, that competition, drove innovation at an incredible speed." "But that sounds terrible," Lyra said. "It was. It is. We fought wars that killed millions. World War I, World War II, the resource wars, each one more devastating than the last. But each war also pushed our technology forward. Nuclear power came from weapons research. Rockets came from missiles. Computers came from code-breaking machines. Even our medical technology advanced because we needed to treat wounded soldiers." Lyra felt sick. "You built your entire civilization on violence?" "Not entirely, but violence was definitely part of it. Look, I'm not proud of our history. Most humans aren't. We teach our children about our wars as warnings, not celebrations. But I can't deny that conflict drove us to innovate in ways that peaceful development might not have." "And your faster-than-light drive?" Nathan hesitated. "That came during what we call the crisis years. Earth was dying. Climate change, resource depletion, overpopulation. We had maybe 50 years before the planet couldn't support us anymore. Different nations were blaming each other. There was talk of a final war, using nuclear weapons to reduce population and secure resources. It was insane, desperate. What happened? A group of scientists working in secret developed the prototype for our FTL drive. They called it the escape drive. The idea was that if Earth was dying, we could at least save some humans by sending them to other worlds. It was a desperate plan. Probably wouldn't have worked, but it gave us hope. And once we had that hope, once we knew we could reach the stars, the pressure eased. Nations started cooperating instead of preparing for war. We saved Earth by learning we could leave it." Lyra sat back, trying to process this. "Your greatest achievement came from desperation and fear." "Yes, and I think that's why we advanced so fast. We didn't have the luxury of taking our time. We couldn't develop peacefully over thousands of years like your people did. We had to adapt quickly or die. So we adapted." There was silence between them for a moment. Finally, Lyra asked the question that had been bothering her most. "Are you still like that? Still desperate and violent?" Nathan considered this carefully. "We're trying not to be. Earth is stable now. We've united under a single government, the Earth Coalition. We've learned to manage our resources sustainably. We haven't had a major war in 80 years, but the instincts are still there. We still prepare for threats. We still design our ships with weapons. We still think about survival first, everything else second. That's what scares the Kathir Council, Lyra said quietly. You look at the universe and see potential threats. We look at it and see potential friends, I know. And honestly, your way is probably healthier. But Lyra, we've encountered hostile species out here. Not everyone in the galaxy is peaceful. 3 years ago, we made contact with a species called the Zentari. We approached them exactly like we approached you. Peaceful, honest, open. They responded by trying to capture our ship and enslave our crew. We barely escaped. What did you do? We fled. We marked their space as hostile and warned other species about them. We didn't go back for revenge. We didn't try to conquer them. We just left and moved on. But that experience taught us that we were right to carry weapons, right to be cautious. The universe has peaceful species like you, and it has violent species like the Zentari. We have to be ready for both. Lyra thought about this. The Kathir had heard of hostile species, but they had always been protected by their mutual defense agreements, by the larger collective that kept peace in this sector. They had never had to face real danger alone. The humans had no such protection. They were alone, strangers in an unknown galaxy with nobody to defend them but themselves. I think I'm starting to understand you, Lyra said slowly. You're not violent because you want to be. You're violent because you had to learn to be. Nathan smiled sadly. That's probably the best way to put it. We're a species shaped by hardship. Every generation of humans has faced some kind of crisis. It's made us tough, adaptable, and yes, dangerous. But we're trying to use those qualities for good now. That's why we're exploring instead of conquering. That's why we're here talking to you instead of demanding things from you. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. When you look at the Kathir, what do you see? Nathan thought about this for a long moment. I see what we might have been if things had gone differently. A peaceful species that advanced through cooperation instead of competition. You've had 3,000 years of civilization, and from what I can tell, you've been at peace for most of it. That's incredible. That's something humans dream about but have never achieved. When I look at your people, I see hope that maybe one day we can be like you. Lyra felt unexpected emotion welling up. When I look at humans, I see strength. Survival against impossible odds. We've been peaceful, yes, but we've also been soft. Protected. We've never had to fight for our existence the way you have. Part of me wonders if we could survive what you've survived. You could, Nathan said firmly. Intelligence is intelligence. Courage is courage. The Kathir have both. You've just never had to test them the way we have. Be grateful for that. They talked for another hour, moving away from heavy topics to lighter ones. Nathan told her about Earth, about the massive cities and wild natural preserves, about the ocean that covered most of the planet. Lyra told him about Velara, about their art and music, about the crystal caves in the southern continent that sang when the wind blew through them. By the time they said goodbye, Lyra felt like she had made a friend. Not just a diplomatic contact, but a real friend. Someone who understood her curiosity, her desire to learn and grow beyond the safe boundaries of her world. The next morning, Lyra was called into Director Messa's office. She expected to be reprimanded for her unauthorized conversation with Nathan. Instead, the director looked pleased. I know you spoke with the human scientist last night, Director Messa said. The communication logs flagged it automatically. But I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to tell you that the Kathir Intelligence Service has completed their analysis of humanity. Lyra's heart sank. And they're terrified. They've accessed human cultural databases, studied their entertainment, their history, their military procedures. They've built a psychological profile of humanity as a species. The conclusion is that humans are one of the most dangerous species we've ever encountered. Not because they're cruel or evil, but because they're so incredibly adaptive and resilient. Every simulation we run shows that in a direct. Lyra had spent 2 days preparing her presentation to the council. She had reviewed every conversation, analyzed every piece of data, tried to find the right words to explain humanity. She was exhausted, running on stimulants and determination. When the alarms started blaring, she was in the communications center working late into the night, when every screen in the facility turned red for the second time in 2 weeks. But this time she knew it wasn't the humans. They were still in high orbit, exactly where they had been, making no threatening moves. This was something else. Something worse. What's happening? Vren shouted from across the room, running to his station. Lyra's hands flew across her controls, pulling up sensor data. Her blood turned to ice. 3 ships. Unknown configuration. They just entered the system through the outer jump point. Director Messa's voice came over the facility-wide communication system. All stations to alert status. Someone identify those vessels now. One of the analysts called out. Director, I've got a match. Configuration matches known Voran raider patterns. They're pirates. The room went silent. Everyone knew about the Voran. They were a species of opportunistic raiders who preyed on peaceful worlds. They traveled in small fleets, hitting targets and disappearing before military forces could respond. They were brutal, efficient, and completely without mercy. How long until they reach Velara? Director Messa demanded. At their current speed, 6 hours, the analyst replied. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies. It's a standard Voran extortion message. Put it on speakers. A harsh guttural voice filled the room. The translation software struggled with the Voran dialect, but the message was clear enough. Primitive world. We are Voran. You have 6 hours to prepare tribute. 1,000 tons of refined metals. 500 units of processed fuel. If tribute is not ready, we begin bombardment. You have been warned. Lyra felt sick. 1,000 tons of refined metals. 500 units of fuel. That was more than Velara produced in a year. The Voran knew they were asking for the impossible. They wanted to attack. The tribute demand was just an excuse. Get me the defense fleet, Director Messa ordered. One of the military advisors shook his head. Director, our defense fleet consists of 6 patrol ships. They're designed for policing our space, not fighting raiders. The Voran have 3 warships. We can't stop them. What about the collective military? Nearest response team is 4 days away. We've already sent the distress signal, but they can't get here in time. Director Messa looked around the room, her face pale. Then we're defenseless. Lyra stood up from her station. No, we're not. Everyone looked at her. She felt her legs shaking, but she forced herself to speak clearly. The humans. They're still in orbit. They have weapons. Maybe they can help. We can't ask them to fight for us, Hessen said. He had arrived at the communications center when the alarm started. We barely know them. We have no alliance, no treaty. We can't drag them into a battle that isn't theirs. So we just let the Voran destroy our cities? Lyra shot back. Kill our people? We have to try. Director Messa was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Lyra, open a channel to the human ship. Emergency priority. Lyra's hands were shaking so badly she could barely work her controls. She opened the communication channel, praying that someone on the Wanderer's Hope was monitoring it. Human vessel, this is Velara Defense Center. We have an emergency situation. Please respond. The response came within seconds. Jake Morrison's face appeared on the screen. He looked alert, concerned. Lyra, what's wrong? Captain, we're under threat. 3 Voran raider ships have entered our system. They're demanding tribute we can't provide. They'll attack in 6 hours. Our defense fleet can't stop them. The nearest collective military force is days away. We're asking for your help. Behind Jake, Lyra could see the bridge of the Wanderer's Hope suddenly alive with activity. Lieutenant Amy Pierce was already at her tactical station, pulling up data. Nathan Cross was frantically working at his science console. Send us all the information you have on the Voran ships, Jake said, his voice calm but firm. Amy, what are we looking at? Amy's voice came through clearly. 3 vessels, Captain. Medium-class raiders. Older technology but well-armed. Plasma cannons, missile systems, standard raider configuration. They're dangerous to undefended targets, but nothing we can't handle. Jake looked directly at Lyra through the screen. We can help, but I need you to understand what that means. If we engage the Voran, it will be violent. We'll do everything we can to minimize casualties, but this will be a fight. Is that what you want? Lyra thought about her people. The city's filled with millions of Kathir who had no idea 3 warships were coming to destroy them. Children who would never grow up. Families who would be torn apart. Art and culture that would be lost forever. Yes, she said firmly. Please help us, Jake nodded. Then consider it done. Lyra, have your people evacuate to shelters just in case. We'll handle the Voran. The screen went dark. Lyra stood there, not quite believing what had just happened. She had just asked the humans to fight for Velara, and they had agreed without hesitation. Director Messa grabbed her shoulder. You did the right thing. Now let's pray they're as capable as we think they are. Aboard the Wanderer's Hope, Jake stood in the center of the bridge, his mind racing through combat scenarios. He hadn't expected this. They were explorers, not soldiers. But the Voron were threatening an innocent world and he couldn't stand by and watch it happen. Amy, full tactical analysis, he ordered. Amy's fingers flew across her controls. 3 Voron ships, designation Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Alpha is the largest, probably the command ship. They're using old-style plasma weapons and conventional missiles. Their shields are moderate, armor is decent but nothing special. Captain, these are intimidation ships. They're used to scaring defenseless targets, not fighting real opposition. Which means they'll either run or fight desperately when they realize we're a threat, Jake said. Nathan, can we disable them without destroying them? Nathan looked up from his console. Their power cores are centralized. If we can knock out their main generators, the ships will be dead in space. But Captain, we'll have to be precise. One wrong shot and we could breach their hulls, kill their crews. Then we'll be precise. Amy, plot an intercept course. Put us between the Voron and Velara. I want them to see us before they get close to the planet. Course plotted. ETA 20 minutes at maximum burn. Jake activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to engage hostile forces. This is not a drill. The Voron raiders are threatening Velara, and we're going to stop them. I know we're explorers, not warriors. But sometimes exploration means protecting those who can't protect themselves. Man your stations, stay calm. Trust your training. Morrison out. He closed the channel and looked at his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. This was what humanity did. They helped. Even when it was dangerous. Even when it wasn't their fight. Take us in, he ordered. The Wanderer's hope accelerated, pushing its engines harder than they had been pushed since leaving Earth. On the main view screen, Jake watched as the Voron ships grew larger. 3 dark shapes against the stars. They've detected us, Amy reported. They're hailing, threatening us to stay out of their way. Ignore them. Charge the railguns. Target their engines and power cores. Prepare electronic warfare package. When they scan us, I want them to see exactly what they're up against. Amy smiled grimly. Aye, Captain. Uploading our full technical specs to their sensors now. On the lead Voron ship, the commander was studying his screens with growing confusion. A single vessel was moving to intercept them. Foolish. The Voron had destroyed dozens of ships that tried to defend their targets. This one would be no different. Then his tactical officer shouted, Commander, that ship's power signature is massive. Energy readings are off our scales, and they're charging weapons we don't recognize. The Voron commander pulled up the data his sensors had gathered. His blood ran cold. That ship was small, but it was generating more power than all 3 of his vessels combined. And those weapons, evasive maneuvers, he ordered. All ships attack pattern 7. Overwhelm them with numbers. But the human ship didn't wait for them to attack. It moved with speed that should have been impossible, closing the distance in seconds. Blue-white streaks of light shot from its hull, so fast the Voron sensors barely registered them. The first railgun shot hit the command ship's port engine. The second hit the power core. Both shots were so precise, so perfectly aimed, that they disabled critical systems without breaching the hull. The ship went dark, powerless, drifting. What just happened? The Voron commander screamed into his communication system. All ships report. Before anyone could answer, the human ship was moving again. It accelerated past the disabled command vessel and fired on the second Voron ship. 2 more shots. Engine and power core. The ship went dark. The third Voron ship's captain made a decision. He had seen enough. Whatever that human vessel was, it was beyond anything the Voron could fight. He spun his ship around and activated his faster-than-light drive, fleeing the system as fast as his engines could manage. The council chamber was filled to capacity. Every seat was taken, and more Kathirs stood along the walls waiting to hear what would be decided about the humans. News of the Voron incident had spread across the planet within hours. Everyone had an opinion about what it meant. Lyra stood at the center of the chamber, feeling very small and very young. The council members sat in a semicircle above her, 12 of the most important Kathir on the planet. Diplomat Hessen was there, along with Director Messa and 10 others she had only seen in news broadcasts. Lyra Tesh, the council leader, began. An elderly female named Petra, who had served for 40 years. You have been the primary contact with the human species. You have spoken with them more than anyone else on Velara. You were present when they defended our world from the Voron. We need your assessment. Who are the humans? What do they want? And most importantly, should we trust them? Lyra took a deep breath. She had prepared a long speech, carefully worded to be diplomatic and balanced. But standing here now after everything that had happened, the prepared words felt wrong. She needed to speak from her heart. Council members, I'm going to be honest. The humans scare me. They have technology we can barely understand. They think about conflict and survival constantly. Their entire history is shaped by violence and hardship. When I first learned about them, I was terrified. I thought they were going to be conquerors, invaders, threats to everything we've built. She paused, looking at each council member in turn. But I was wrong. Not about them being dangerous. They are dangerous. The Vorin learned that. But being dangerous isn't the same as being evil. The humans carry weapons because they've needed them to survive. They prepare for threats because they've faced threats. They think about war because they've experienced war. But despite all of that, despite being shaped by violence, they chose to help us. Not for profit. Not for territory. Not because we forced them. They helped because it was the right thing to do. Hessen leaned forward. But can we trust them long term? What happens when their interests conflict with ours? What happens when helping us isn't convenient anymore? Lyra thought about her conversations with Jake, with Nathan, with all the humans she had spoken to over the past 2 weeks. I believe we can trust them. Not because they're perfect, not because they don't have their own interests, but because they've proven through their actions that they value honor and friendship. They appeared in our space without warning, and they immediately apologized and asked permission to stay. They shared their technology freely. They answered our questions honestly, even when the answers made them look bad, and when we needed help, they didn't hesitate. One of the other council members spoke up, a military advisor named Kren. The intelligence reports paint a concerning picture. Human entertainment is filled with violence. Their military doctrines are frighteningly thorough. They have contingency plans for scenarios we've never even imagined. This is a species that thinks about combat constantly. Yes, Lyra agreed. But thinking about something and wanting it are different. Humans prepare for war because they've learned that being unprepared leads to disaster, but they don't seek war. If they did, they would have used the Varan incident as an excuse to establish a military presence here. They could have demanded payment for their protection. They could have positioned themselves as our saviors and asked for control of our defense systems. They did none of those things. They helped us, then returned to their previous position and waited for us to decide what happens next. Petra, the council leader, nodded thoughtfully. What do you think they want from us, Lyra? I think they want what they've said they want from the beginning. Friendship, knowledge exchange, eventually trade and mutual cooperation. They're explorers trying to find their place in the galaxy. They don't have the collective's protection like we do. They don't have a network of allies. They're alone out here, and I think they're looking for connections, for relationships that can make the universe a little less dangerous. And you believe they're sincere? Lyra nodded firmly. Yes, I've spoken with them extensively. I've watched how they interact with us. They're genuine. They make mistakes, they're imperfect, but they're sincere in their desire to build a peaceful relationship. Hessen spoke again. But what about their nature? You said yourself they're shaped by violence. Can a species really change its fundamental nature? This was the question Lyra had been waiting for, the one she had spent hours thinking about. I don't think they're trying to change their nature. I think they're trying to direct it. Humans are survivors. That's their nature. In the past, survival meant fighting. Now survival means building alliances and exploring. Their nature hasn't changed, but how they express it has. And honestly, Council, I think we could learn from them. That caused murmurs throughout the chamber. Petra raised her hand for silence. Explain. The Kathir have been peaceful for 300 years. That's wonderful. That's something to be proud of. But we've also become soft. We have no real defenses. We depend entirely on the collective military to protect us. When the Vorin came, we were helpless. If the humans hadn't been here, our cities would be burning right now. Maybe it's time we learn from a species that knows how to survive in a dangerous universe. Kren, the military advisor, leaned back in his seat, looking thoughtful. You're suggesting we learn military tactics from humans? I'm suggesting we learn preparedness. Not paranoia, but reasonable readiness. The humans aren't paranoid. They're realistic. They know the universe has both peaceful species and hostile ones. They prepare for both. We only prepare for peace, and that makes us vulnerable. Director Messa spoke up from her seat. Lyra makes a valid point. The Voran attack proved that our current defense systems are inadequate. Perhaps an alliance with humanity could help us address that weakness, while also giving us access to their technology and knowledge. Petra looked around the chamber. Does anyone have any other questions for Lyra? One of the younger council members, a scientist named Vesa, raised her hand. Lyra, do you personally like the humans? Lyra smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Yes, I do. I find them fascinating and frustrating in equal measure. They're complicated, full of contradictions. They're warriors who want peace. They're cynical but hopeful. They've suffered terribly but still manage to smile. I like them because they're real. They don't pretend to be perfect. They just try to be better than they were yesterday. Petra nodded. Thank you, Lyra. You may step back. The council will deliberate. Lyra moved to the side of the chamber and stood against the wall. She watched as the council members began discussing among themselves, their voices too low for her to hear clearly. The debate went on for over an hour. She saw Hessen arguing passionately about something, his hands gesturing emphatically. She saw Kren nodding along with Director Messa. She saw Petra listening carefully to everyone, her face neutral. Finally, Petra called for silence. We have reached a decision. The vote was not unanimous, but the majority has prevailed. The Kathir Council has decided to formally recommend to the collective that humanity be welcomed as a new member species. We will sponsor their introduction to the other collective races. We will establish trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and mutual defense treaties. And we will assign Lyra Tesh as the official Kathir liaison to humanity, to continue building the bridge she has already begun. Lyra felt her legs go weak. She had done it. The humans were going to be accepted, and she was going to continue working with them. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some Kathir were celebrating, others looked worried. But the decision was made. Petra gestured for Lyra to approach. You did well today. Your honesty and insight were valuable. Now comes the hard part. You'll need to travel to the collective capital with the human ship. You'll represent Velara during their introduction. Are you willing? Yes, Council Leader. I'm honored. Good. Inform Captain Morrison of our decision. Tell him we're ready to begin the next phase of our relationship. Lyra left the council chamber and went directly to the communications center. Her hands were shaking, but this time it was from excitement rather than fear. She opened a channel to the Wanderer's hope. Jake's face appeared on screen. He looked tired but alert. Lyra, what did the council decide? We want to sponsor your introduction to the collective, she said, unable to keep the smile off her face. We're going to recommend that humanity be welcomed as a new member species. Captain Morrison, the Kathir officially want to be your friends. Jake's face broke into a genuine smile. The first one Lyra had seen from him that reached all the way to his eyes. That's incredible news. Thank you, Lyra. Thank you for believing in us. There's more. I've been assigned as the official liaison. I'll be traveling with you to the collective capital. I'll be representing Velara during your introduction. Then I look forward to having you aboard. When should we prepare to depart? The council suggests 1 week. That gives us time to prepare proper documentation and for me to pack. She laughed at the absurdity of that last part. I'm going to leave my planet for the first time in my life, and I'm worried about packing. Jake laughed too. That's normal. When I left Earth for the first time, I